My name is Tom Pelshaw. Currently, I'm employed as a member of the Corps of Commissionaires in Canada.
The HMS Magpie was a British schooner launched in Jamaica during the summer of 1826. The ship patrolled for pirate and slave ships and protected British interests around the Caribbean. After only 2 months at sea, she capsized off the coast of Cuba. 35 men were on board. Exact details of the event are preserved in written accounts, including an inquiry court-martialed by the British Admiralty. These records tell of harrowing conditions faced by crew members and the heroic actions taken by their young captain, Lieutenant Edward Smith, who perished after desperate, though remarkably composed attempts to save his men. Only 2 survivors emerged from the wreckage. Smith would be recognised posthumously for his bravery by the British Admiralty.
Hi, Tom. Welcome to Militaria. What have you brought us today?
What I have here is a plaque. The gentleman who owned it was supporting his family during the Great Depression, and unfortunately, the fishing industry was down. So to support them, he became a rum runner, and his runs would go from Caribbean to Lunenburg and back. And of course, he'd be bringing in all kinds of interesting alcohol to Nova Scotia during the Great Depression.
So, Tom, what is unique about the 2 birds here on the front of this carving? Could you explain that to us a little bit?
Yes, I looked at it and I thought to myself, they're magpies. They're not hawks, they're not eagles, but magpies? I thought that was rather unusual. Not only was it carved with the magpies, there are certain parts to the plaque that point towards Jamaica. This is a pineapple up here, and these here, you would think on any other British plaque, you might have olive branches. These are actually banana leaves. And then you have a single star under the magpie. And as you know, a single star signifies the rank of a commander of a ship. The magpies themselves are rather unique in that if you look in their eyes, they're very serious looking. And in their talons, each one of them has a talon wrapped around what it signifies a cannonade or a cannonball, hence again, a warship.
So, Tom, how was this piece found and acquired?
It's hard to imagine the kind of power behind a storm. A squall, which is like a miniature hurricane, would take the ship and whipped it all over the place. And because it was a sloop, it wasn't, if you had ships on the line like the HMS Victory, they had tons and tons and tons of iron cannonball in their ballast, and they would sink to the bottom. Contrary to that, because it was not heavily weighted, it might have had a ton of cannonballs on it. It stayed afloat, but it was whipped around, it was partially sinking, and it was pushed ashore. And of course, you have people who make a living walking down the beach, and in that part of the world, with all the ship fare, you would occasionally come across a wreck of a ship. Now, there was a gentleman or a lady walking along the shore one day, and they saw the wreck of the HMS Victory. And not really even being sure what it was, the gentleman walked up, saw this plaque, and he couldn't just take it. He had to cut it out. So they grabbed an axe, and they literally, you could see the marks here where they had chopped it to remove it from its housing. And that's how it was found.
It's kind of a sad tale with HMS Magpie. I mean, she was commissioned in 1826, and then with only 2 months of being in service, that squall hit the sloop, and that was it. And unfortunate as well is the story of the commander of HMCS Magpie, Lieutenant Edward Smith, and his sad ending. Do you want to tell us a bit about Lieutenant Edward Smith and his final end?
I'd love to. An inquiry was held by the British Admiralty. They had the 2 survivors at this board of inquiry, and when they started to give their testimony, they started to cry because they were so taken with the heroism displayed by Lieutenant Smith, in that rather than have his men jump overboard in what was a sea of sharks, he jumped in the water himself, and he guided his men. And the most intriguing part was this officer commanded his men and instructed them while he was being eaten by sharks. He never panicked, never raised his voice. And finally, one came by, bit his legs off, and he was dragged slowly to the bottom. He never showed any emotion other than being an officer of the Royal Navy.
Tom, coming from a military family, does this artifact have even more significance and meaning to you personally?
The intriguing thing about this is I purchased it from an online source, and there was no indication of size. There was just the photograph. So I thought I was picking up a board that was maybe a foot by 14 inches. So I was really surprised at what I came across. But it has such a strong military presence. I mean, it looks like something you would see on a crest. And of course, having a military background, that appealed to me.
Tom, you had mentioned that the original owner of this plaque was a rum runner. Do you want to tell us a little bit about him?
Yes, by all means. This young lady, she was a little girl, and she knew that her grandfather, who was a fisherman, was doing something a little different now because he couldn't support his family. The fish market, fish stocks were down. So in order to feed his family, pay his bills, he decided, like hundreds of other fishermen along the coast of Nova Scotia, to get into rum running. This involved taking his boat to the Caribbean. It could be St. Lucia, it could be Haiti or Jamaica, and picking up kegs of rum and bringing them back to little outports in Nova Scotia where they would be transported and sold. It was hazardous, and there would be literally dozens of police along the shore just waiting for these men to come in with their boats. And of course, they'd be arrested and the alcohol confiscated. It was a very dangerous profession. And both sides were armed, not only the police, but also the men who were running the rum. So sometimes there would be pitched battles as the police tried to arrest them. Rather hazardous occupation.
Tom, thank you so much for coming today and bringing this beautiful artifact with you. What are your future plans for this?
Well, I'm certainly not going to say that I'm going to cut it up and use it for firewood, that's for sure. No, actually, I spent a long time researching this, and I would like to think that eventually it's going to find its way into a museum. For the time being, I'm going to keep it. However, if someone were to come along, a gentleman who's serious about maritime or nautical antiques, were interested in purchasing, I might consider that.
Well, Tom, thank you so much for bringing this beautiful artifact from HMS Magpie. It had such a wonderful story, and really appreciate that you shared that with us today.
Thank you very much, and it was really nice to have your input as far as letting me know things that I had not, in months and months of research, been able to find out. Thank you kindly for your research.
Oh, you're welcome.
Jennifer, thank you.
What I find really interesting about artifacts like this piece from the Magpie is that an artifact isn't just an artifact because it was made 200 years ago, or particularly who owned it. It really, you have to kind of look beyond that. You have to look about the symbolism within the artifact and what it means and what it's representing. So often, unsimilarly normal objects in our everyday lives might speak to a bigger history and story that we don't even know about. And that's what's great about this piece from the Magpie. It really speaks to the time, the period, and what was really going on in the Caribbean.